Heather is introduced in a lonely, quiet area, standing silently as she watches a flock of pigeons. Tears stream down her face while she tightly clutches a small, smooth stone she uses to ease her anxiety. The moment she notices people getting closer, she quickly walks away, as if she doesn't want anyone to see her in that vulnerable state. Soon after, the story shifts to Heather's home, a place that instantly feels uncomfortable and unsettling. The walls are decorated with framed insects, creating a cold and disturbing atmosphere. In the kitchen, the constant buzzing of a wasp begins to irritate Heather more and more. Eventually, she traps the insect inside a glass container and asks her husband, Simon, to contact an exterminator because she's convinced there's a nest hidden somewhere in the house. However, Simon brushes off her worries and barely takes the issue seriously. A short while later, Heather receives a notification on her phone informing her that her fertility window will end in just 3 days. Before leaving for work, Simon reminds her about an important dinner party they'll be hosting for his coworkers the following evening. He insists that everything must be perfectly arranged because he wants to impress their guests. Although Heather doesn't seem excited about the idea, she quietly agrees to handle the preparations. After Simon leaves, the trapped wasp starts buzzing loudly again from the kitchen. The sound slowly pushes Heather toward frustration, and in a sudden moment of anger, she kills it. That act immediately brings back a disturbing memory from her childhood. Years earlier, Heather and her close friend Carla had discovered a badly injured pigeon suffering on the ground. While Heather hesitated in shock, Carla picked up a heavy brick and crushed the bird to end its pain. The brutal moment deeply disturbed Heather and stayed in her mind ever since. Back in the present, the film subtly reveals the cracks in Heather and Simon's marriage. Their conversations feel distant, and the emotional disconnect between them becomes impossible to ignore. The next morning, Simon gets ready for work as usual, but before leaving, Heather overhears him making plans for a meeting scheduled at 2 a.m., hearing that instantly unsettles her, hinting that there may be secrets hiding beneath the surface of their already fragile relationship. Sometime later, Heather sits alone with her laptop and searches for Carla's social media profile. She starts typing out a message, clearly wanting to reconnect after all these years. But after staring at the screen for a few seconds, she loses confidence and decides not to send it. That same evening, Simon hosts the important dinner gathering for several people connected to his work. The guests laugh, drink, and socialize comfortably, but Heather remains distant from everyone, spending most of the night isolated in the kitchen. While standing there, she finally discovers the source of the strange buzzing sounds that have been tormenting her. Irritated and overwhelmed, she grabs a hammer and repeatedly smashes the ceiling above her. Without warning, a massive wasp nest crashes onto the floor, releasing a swarm of angry wasps into the kitchen. Chaos erupts instantly. Simon rushes in, drags Heather out of the room, and quickly seals the door behind them before anyone gets stung. Although nobody is seriously harmed, the disturbing incident completely ruins the atmosphere of the party. The uncomfortable guests soon decide to leave one by one. After everyone is gone, Simon loses his patience and blames Heather for destroying the evening he worked so hard to organize. Frustrated and embarrassed, he tells her he'll finally contact an exterminator the following day. The story then shifts to Carla, who is now working long hours as a cashier at a local supermarket. After finishing her shift, she heads back home, and it's revealed that she's pregnant. On her way, she notices a message from Heather asking to meet and claiming it would be worth her time. Instead of replying, Carla ignores the message and continues chatting with an online friend named Logan, someone who has been secretly helping her financially. It quickly becomes obvious that Carla is struggling badly with money and barely managing to support her household. Soon after, her oldest son, David, calls and asks her to return home immediately. When Carla arrives, we discover that she lives in a cramped house with her 4 children and a much older husband, a man old enough to seem more like her father than her partner. Not long later, Carla receives another message, this time from a wealthy man named James asking to meet her for a couple of hours. She lies to her husband about where she's going before quietly leaving the house. Outside, James picks her up in an expensive car and drives away with her. Sometime later, he drops her back off at the same location and hands her a stack of cash before leaving. At that moment, it becomes clear that Carla has been secretly selling her body in order to survive and provide for her family during their financial hardship. Later that night, Carla checks her phone again and notices that Logan still hasn't answered any of her messages. Feeling frustrated and out of options, she finally replies to Heather and agrees to meet her. The following morning, the two women reunite for the first time in many years. Heather appears emotional and genuinely happy to see her childhood friend again, but Carla keeps the conversation cold and distant, clearly uninterested in small talk. After exchanging a few awkward updates about their lives, Carla quickly asks Heather to explain why she really wanted to meet. During their conversation, it becomes clear that the two were once inseparable as children before suddenly drifting apart for reasons that still remain uncertain. Heather then brings up the disturbing memory of the injured pigeon they found years ago and reminds Carla how she crushed it with a brick. Surprisingly, Carla barely even remembers the moment that has haunted Heather ever since. Since she's already running late for work, Carla decides to leave, but Heather walks beside her and continues talking. She explains that she and Simon have spent years desperately trying to have a child. They even went through fertility treatments and insemination attempts, yet nothing ever worked. In the middle of the conversation, Carla casually asks if Heather wants to adopt her unborn baby, but Heather immediately rejects the idea. A little later, Heather reveals another painful truth. Simon has been having an affair with a woman he met online. Confused, Carla asks how she discovered it, and that's when Heather shocks her with an unbelievable confession. The mysterious woman Simon has been talking to online is actually Heather herself. For the past 2 years, she has secretly pretended to be another woman online and used that fake identity to communicate with her own husband. Now Simon finally wants to meet the woman he believes he's fallen for. Carla becomes uncomfortable listening to all of this and decides she wants no part in Heather's personal drama. She leaves for work, hoping the conversation is finally over. However, later that day, while Carla is working at the supermarket counter, Heather suddenly appears again and asks to speak with her privately. Already annoyed and emotionally exhausted, Carla refuses at first, but Heather quietly tells her she has 10,000 pounds inside her bag and will hand it over if Carla meets her near the loading bay in 5 minutes. The mention of that amount of money instantly changes Carla's reaction. Desperate because of her financial situation, she reluctantly agrees and meets Heather in private behind the store. Once they're alone, Heather wastes no time. She directly tells Carla that she wants Simon dead. The request completely shocks Carla, but Heather calmly explains that Simon has cheated on her for years and subjected her to both emotional and physical abuse throughout their marriage. Then she raises the offer even further, promising Carla another 50,000 pounds if she agrees to kill him. To push her even harder, Heather once again brings up the pigeon from their childhood, reminding Carla how quickly she ended its suffering without hesitation. Heather insists that this proves Carla is capable of doing what needs to be done, but Carla angrily fires back, saying that killing a helpless bird and murdering a human being are two completely different things. Still trying to manipulate her, Heather starts exposing details about Carla's personal life. She mentions the family's financial struggles and even reveals that Carla's husband has a serious gambling addiction. Then comes the biggest shock of all. Heather admits that she is actually Logan, the online friend Carla has been trusting and talking to for months. The confession leaves Carla speechless. Feeling betrayed and disturbed, she immediately tries to walk away from the conversation, but after taking only a few steps, she suddenly stops. The thoughts of her children, her debts, and the miserable life waiting for her at home begin racing through her mind, forcing her to seriously consider the terrifying offer Heather has placed in front of her. After thinking about the offer and the desperate situation waiting for her at home, Carla finally turns back toward Heather and agrees to the deal, but only on one condition. If Heather truly wants Simon gone, the payment must be increased to 75,000 pounds. Sometime later, Heather anxiously waits inside her house while nervously watching the street through the window. Outside, a neighbor's child plays nearby, making Heather even more paranoid about attracting attention. Before long, Carla arrives wearing a hoodie and quietly slips inside after Heather quickly opens the door for her. Once inside, Carla immediately makes it clear that 75,000 pounds still isn't enough compensation for the possibility of spending the rest of her life in prison. Because of that, she insists they need a solid and believable plan before anything happens. Carla explains that she watches a lot of true crime documentaries and has learned how investigators usually catch careless killers. That's why she arrived wearing gloves and avoided touching unnecessary surfaces. According to her, the safest method would be to use an ordinary object already inside the house as the murder weapon, so nothing could be connected back to her personally. She also suggests staging the entire crime scene to look like a robbery. Her idea is simple. After killing Simon, she would take a few expensive belongings before leaving to make the police believe a burglar was responsible. As they continue discussing murder over tea and biscuits, the situation starts feeling disturbingly casual. Heather argues that the fake burglary idea sounds too obvious and predictable. Instead, she suggests secretly putting something into Simon's drink to knock him unconscious before calling Carla to finish the job. Carla immediately rejects the idea, pointing out that toxicology tests during an autopsy could easily expose drugs in his system. Then Carla asks the question neither of them had fully considered yet. What are they supposed to do with the body afterward? Without hesitation, Heather calmly suggests dismembering Simon's body and feeding the remains to a dog. The horrifying suggestion instantly changes the mood in the room. Even Carla, who had already agreed to murder for money, looks genuinely disturbed by how cold and extreme Heather has become. She quickly refuses the idea and firmly tells Heather that since she's the one risking everything, she'll decide how things are handled. Her final plan is much simpler. Heather just needs to get Simon heavily drunk and then call her once the opportunity is right. After settling on the plan, the two women begin rehearsing what happens next. Carla coaches Heather on exactly how to behave after Simon's death. They practice her panic, how she should scream for help, what she should say to the neighbors, and how she should sound while calling the police, so everything appears genuine. As the conversation continues, it slowly drifts away from the murder plot and toward their shared past. Heather admits that during her teenage years, she struggled with severe depression and spent most of school feeling isolated and miserable. Carla initially dismisses it, saying everyone had a difficult childhood and school was hard for plenty of people back then. But Heather suddenly reveals that Carla herself was one of the main reasons her life became so painful. The accusation completely catches Carla off guard. Confused, she argues that kids constantly teased and insulted each other in school. and she honestly can't understand why Heather is still holding onto old memories after so many years. That's when Heather finally explains what she has never forgotten. Back in 7th grade, the two of them had once been incredibly close friends, practically inseparable, before something happened that changed their relationship forever. Heather finally reveals what destroyed their friendship all those years ago. According to her, everything changed suddenly one day when Carla unexpectedly turned against her without any warning. A flashback takes us back to their school days. Young Heather is quietly walking through the hallway when Carla suddenly approaches her alongside a group of girls. In front of everyone, Carla humiliates Heather by exposing her secret crush on a boy named Toby. She cruelly tells the other students that Heather fantasized about him in the shower and behaved inappropriately while thinking about him. Heather desperately denies the accusation, but nobody listens. The rumor spreads through the school within moments, and the other students begin laughing at her and mocking her with cruel nicknames, while Heather runs away, crying in humiliation. Back in the present, Heather explains that the incident ruined her school life for years. The cruel nickname stuck with her long after the rumor faded, constantly reminding her of the embarrassment and isolation she experienced because of Carla. Carla, however, has clearly grown tired of revisiting the past. Irritated and defensive, she insists she didn't come there to sit through accusations about things that happened when they were children. She threatens to leave the house entirely. But Heather calmly points out that Carla isn't really going anywhere because she desperately needs the money being offered. That comment immediately hits a nerve. For the first time, Carla completely loses her composure and explodes emotionally. She admits that while Heather remembers school rumors and bullying, her own childhood was far more horrifying behind closed doors. Carla reveals that on the very same day she killed the injured pigeon, her father had violently attacked her mother so brutally that one of her eyes was left hanging from its socket. She then confesses that the abuse eventually turned toward her as well. Over time, her father began hurting her too, leaving her trapped in a terrifying home environment. Carla explains that whenever she visited Heather's house and saw a normal, loving family, it filled her with jealousy and resentment. Eventually, she convinced herself that Heather could never truly understand her pain because their lives were completely different. Heather quietly responds that even as a child, she knew something terrible was happening inside Carla's home. But back then, she was too young and powerless to know how to help her friend properly. The only thing she felt capable of doing was spending time with Carla and trying to give her moments of happiness whenever she could. Another flashback then reveals just how toxic their friendship eventually became. After class one day, Carla suddenly grabs Heather and drags her into a storage room. Once they're alone, Carla violently attacks her, beating her badly and nearly breaking her nose. Back in the present, Heather explains that despite the betrayal, humiliation, and violence, part of her still cared deeply about Carla at the time. That's why, when the school principal later questioned her about the attack, she never exposed Carla as the person responsible. Even after hearing this, Carla still struggles to fully accept blame for her actions. She argues that school was cruel for everyone and claims that growing up simply forced people to survive however they could. According to her, everyone carried their own pain, and what happened between them was just another part of that harsh reality. After listening to Heather continue bringing up painful memories from the past, Carla finally loses patience. Frustrated and emotionally drained, she tells Heather that if they're not going to focus on the actual murder plan, then she's wasting her time and might as well leave. Trying to move the conversation forward, Carla asks the most basic question possible. What does Simon even look like? Up to this point, she has agreed to kill a man she has never actually seen. Heather quietly grabs a photograph and shows her a picture of herself standing beside Simon. The second Carla sees the image, her entire expression changes. She instantly recognizes him. Simon is actually James, the wealthy client Carla has been secretly meeting in exchange for money. Heather then reveals the truth. James was never his real name at all. Simon simply used that fake identity whenever he arranged meetings with sex workers. The shocking realization completely rattles Carla. Overwhelmed and confused, she suddenly begins feeling weak and dizzy. Her vision blurs, and she struggles to stay focused. That's when it becomes clear that Heather secretly drugged the tea Carla had been drinking earlier. Before Carla can react properly, Heather presses a chloroform-soaked cloth over her face. Within moments, Carla loses consciousness completely. After knocking her out, Heather calmly walks outside and leaves a handwritten note at her neighbor's door before quietly returning home. Sometime later, Carla slowly regains consciousness. She finds herself tied tightly to a chair with a gag stuffed into her mouth. Panic immediately takes over as she struggles desperately against the restraints. But no matter how hard she tries, she can't break free. Heather then wakes her more fully by holding something strong-smelling near her face. As Carla continues panicking, Heather begins speaking in an unusually calm and unsettling tone. She explains that for years she believed her inability to get pregnant was caused by something physically wrong with her body. She blamed herself over and over, convinced that she was somehow broken. But now, after thinking deeply about the past, she believes she finally understands the real reason she could never conceive. As Carla sits there terrified and restrained, Heather slowly returns to talking about their childhood and the events from school that have haunted her for years, suggesting that everything happening now is connected to wounds that never truly healed. Heather continues revealing the painful memories she has carried for years. She explains that during year 9, she had finally begun rebuilding her confidence after everything Carla had previously done to her. Slowly, she started making new friends at school. and one day they invited her to a dance. At first, Heather was terrified to attend because she feared Carla might show up, even though an entire year had passed since the violent incident in the storage room. Heather says she was still suffering from panic attacks and constant anxiety because of it. However, after hearing that Carla supposedly wouldn't be attending the event, she finally gathered enough courage to go. For a short time, the night actually felt normal. Heather laughed with her new friends, enjoyed the music, and briefly felt like she was finally escaping the fear and humiliation that had haunted her for so long. But everything changed the moment Carla unexpectedly arrived at the dance. The instant Heather spotted her, panic completely took over. Terrified, she ran away from the crowd and locked herself inside a bathroom stall, hoping to hide until Carla left. Not long afterward, Carla and 2 other girls found her there. What followed became the memory that would permanently scar Heather's life. The girls violently humiliated and assaulted her while laughing at her distress and treating the situation like entertainment. Before leaving, Carla mockingly praised Heather as if she had done something deserving approval, making the experience even more emotionally devastating. Back in the present, Heather asks Carla how she could possibly forget something so horrific after the damage it caused. A little later, Heather walks upstairs and calls Simon, calmly asking him to message her when he's heading home. After the call, she changes into elegant clothes before returning downstairs, almost as if she's preparing for some twisted version of a special occasion. When she comes back, she notices Carla attempting to loosen her restraints and escape. Heather then explains that after the incident at the school dance, she never truly felt normal again. She says it always felt like something inside her had been permanently damaged. Even though doctors could never find anything physically wrong during medical examinations, Heather became convinced there was some invisible blockage growing inside her over the years, almost like an emotional wound that had turned into something living inside her body. Eventually, Heather removes the tape from Carla's mouth, but not before warning her that screaming would get her killed immediately. The moment she can speak, Carla breaks down and begs desperately for mercy. She apologizes repeatedly for the person she used to be and admits that as a teenager she enjoyed hurting others because she was deeply broken herself. In desperation, Carla even offers Heather her unborn child. Then she reveals another shocking truth. The baby she's carrying actually belongs to Simon. Carla becomes convinced that Heather and Simon planned everything together in order to steal the baby from her. But Heather calmly reveals something even more horrifying. Simon is already dead. She tells Carla that she killed him earlier and hid his body inside a cupboard beneath the staircase. Heather then coldly explains her final plan. She intends to take the baby herself and leave Carla to die afterward. The horrifying confession pushes Carla into full panic, and she starts screaming uncontrollably. The noise catches the attention of the young girl living next door, who is playing outside nearby. Realizing someone might hear, Heather quickly covers Carla's mouth again with duct tape before more attention is drawn to the house. Moments later, Heather receives a text message and quietly reads it. As if nothing unusual is happening, she begins applying makeup while calmly speaking about how desperately she once wanted to become a mother. She says she dreamed of creating a loving family and giving all the affection she still had left to a child of her own. But the moment she discovered that the woman who destroyed her childhood had also been sleeping with her husband, every remaining piece of her emotionally collapsed. After finishing her makeup, Heather suddenly cuts Carla's restraints with a knife and tells her she's choosing to trust her not to run away. The second Carla is free, survival instincts take over. She immediately searches the house for an escape route, but quickly realizes every door has been locked from the inside. Desperate and terrified, she grabs a chair to use as a weapon, preparing herself for whatever Heather is about to do next. Outside the house, the neighbor's young daughter catches a glimpse of the confrontation through the window. But from her limited perspective, it looks like Carla is the dangerous one threatening Heather. Inside, Carla eventually realizes there's no way to escape. The doors are locked, the windows are secured, and panic is only making things worse. After a tense silence, Heather calmly asks her to come back downstairs so they can talk one last time. Reluctantly, Carla returns and sits across from her again. This time, Carla tries to explain the difference between them. She admits she has been cruel and violent in the past and accepts responsibility for the pain she caused people. But according to her, those actions always came from uncontrolled anger, fear, and impulse. She argues that she never carefully planned someone's suffering the way Heather has planned everything tonight. Carla also accuses Heather of pretending to stand on moral high ground while now becoming far worse than the person she hates. Heather responds by saying that Carla became toxic long before tonight. After being hurt by violence at home, she chose to spread that pain onto others instead of breaking the cycle. Since she couldn't experience happiness herself, she tried to destroy it wherever she saw it. But Carla fires back that Heather is now doing exactly the same thing. The argument slowly grows more intense until Heather suddenly places the knife down on the table between them. In a disturbingly calm voice, she tells Carla that she now has a choice between kindness and violence. She asks her to listen to what her instincts are truly telling her to do. Then Heather starts recounting everything that has happened over the past several hours. The threats, the manipulation, the terrifying claim that she would cut the baby from Carla's body, and the confession that she supposedly murdered Simon, the father of Carla's unborn child. While calmly repeating all of this, Heather slowly begins walking toward her with one hand hidden inside her pocket. Immediately, Carla becomes terrified and demands to know what Heather is holding. But Heather refuses to answer, convinced that Heather is reaching for a weapon. Carla reacts instinctively. In a moment of panic, she grabs the knife from the table and violently stabs Heather in the stomach. Only after the blade goes in do we finally see what Heather had been hiding in her pocket. It wasn't a weapon at all. It was the small worry stone she always carried to calm herself. At that exact moment, the front door suddenly opens. Simon walks inside, completely unharmed and very much alive, revealing that Heather lied about killing him the entire time. As Heather collapses onto the floor, bleeding, she looks at Carla and softly calls her good girl, almost as if this was the outcome she wanted all along. Simon is horrified by the scene in front of him. He rushes toward Heather, finding her lying in a pool of blood, while Carla stands nearby in shock, holding the knife. Desperate for answers, Simon asks what happened, but Heather dies before she can explain anything. The film then ends with one final flashback to their childhood. After Carla killed the injured pigeon, young Heather ran away in fear and confusion. Meanwhile, Carla remained behind crying and desperately calling after her, begging her to come back. The final scene leaves it unclear whether Heather's entire plan was revenge, a twisted search for justice, or a desperate attempt to prove that deep down, Carla's violent instincts had never truly changed. Back in the present, the commotion inside the house finally draws the attention of the neighbors. Hearing the noise and seeing the chaos, they rush over and immediately assume the worst. Simon desperately tries to explain that he didn't kill Heather, but before he can convince anyone, the neighbor reveals that she already knows what happened. She then hands Simon the note Heather secretly left earlier. In the letter, Heather claimed that her husband and his mistress were planning to murder her. At that moment, the horrifying truth behind Heather's actions finally becomes clear. Not long afterward, police officers arrive at the house and arrest both Simon and Carla. From the outside, the evidence perfectly supports Heather's story. Simon was secretly involved with Carla. Carla was found holding the weapon, and Heather had already predicted her own murder in writing. Everything had been arranged to point directly at them. In the film's final moments, the camera slowly focuses on Heather's lifeless body. Then a wasp crawls out from her wound and slowly moves across her face before the screen fades out. And with that disturbing image, the story comes to an end. By the conclusion, it becomes obvious that Heather's plan was never only about killing Simon or escaping her pain. Her true goal was revenge against both people she believed had destroyed her life. Simon, the husband who betrayed her, and Carla, the childhood friend whose cruelty left emotional scars that never healed. That's why Heather specifically chose Carla from the beginning. She carefully manipulated every conversation, every confession, and every situation to psychologically trap her. Step by step, Heather pushed Carla into a state of fear and desperation, where stabbing her felt like the only possible way to survive. And the moment Carla drove the knife into her stomach, Heather finally achieved exactly what she wanted. To everyone else, it now appeared that Simon and his secret lover had worked together to murder Heather. In the end, Heather sacrificed her own life to completely destroy both of theirs as her final act of revenge. The final image of the wasp crawling out of Heather's body serves as a powerful symbol throughout the story. It represents the anger, trauma, humiliation, and emotional poison she had carried inside herself for years, finally escaping after her death. For Heather, revenge became the only thing that gave her a sense of release after a lifetime of pain and obsession. If you enjoyed this dark and twisted psychological thriller, make sure to hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Did Heather get the revenge she wanted, or did everyone lose in the end? And if you want more disturbing movie recaps and mind-blowing endings like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story.